You have the power to save coral reefs. I know what you're thinking. Me? What could I possibly do? After all we've just learned about the threats they're facing, especially climate change, it's such a complex global problem. Some people don't even believe in it. What am I supposed to do about that? Well, it turns out that I've been fascinated by questions like this since I was a child. In fact, my mother tells me that when I was only 4, I used to stand in the corner of rooms, completely silent, just watching people intently. Now, I'm not sure if that makes me odd or just a really good social scientist, but I'm certainly hoping it's the latter. Now, after all these years of studying people, what if I told you that something I've learned is that simply changing the way that we talk about climate change can make all the difference? How do we talk about climate change? Perhaps it's not surprising that the most common narrative is one of doom and gloom, right? We've all seen these alarming stories of flooding, hurricanes, famine, right? We're doomed, and so are coral reefs. Now, while this narrative is really good at attracting attention, it's absolutely horrible at getting the public engaged. In fact, research in psychology shows that it activates fear, guilt, and shame. And big surprise, we don't like feeling like this. It makes us worry. It makes us anxious. And at the extreme, it can even make us challenge the significance of the issue altogether. So what do? We disengage. We put our heads in the sand. So what do we need to do then? We need not downplay the severity of climate change, but what we must do is a much better job at balancing our narratives with positive messages that motivate action through appeals to hope and pride. We also need to highlight tangible solutions that can show people or demonstrate to them what they can do to make a difference. For example, did you know that simply providing people with feedback on their energy consumption can make a difference? A company called O-Power did this, a big electric company in the United States, and homeowners were able to save enough electricity to power the entire city of Miami for a year. It's incredible, and people need to hear these types of stories because they spur creativity, they motivate us, and they make us feel empowered to help find long-term solutions. Now, unfortunately, there's one more problem about how we talk about climate change. And it's often framed as a problem that's distant in both time and space. So although we're often told that we need to take action now, the benefits of doing so are unfolding over decades or centuries, and they're affecting things like polar bears and people in faraway places, or people that will exist in the future. Now, research from behavioral economics will tell you that that's a really bad idea because most of us prefer benefits today rather than later. Right? We'd much prefer to have $1 today than $2 10 years from now, and especially 100 years from now. Also, who are these unidentifiable people who will exist in the future anyway? Right? Research in psychology shows us that the farther we try to look into the future, the fuzzier our view. So it's really hard for us to feel a really strong moral obligation to them. So what to do? We need to frame climate change in the here and now by tying it to everyday concerns that require action to increase benefits today. For example, we can highlight things like how important it is to protect the things that we love that need to happen now. We can also discuss how taking action can help to reduce burdens on our own children and grandchildren, who we feel a much stronger moral obligation to protect. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This is all fine and good, but there's some people who don't even believe in climate change. Right, we've all had the Christmas dinner with our climate-denying uncle. And every time we come armed with a new fact or figure that we're sure is going to be the one to win him over, it somehow never works. Now, research in the cognitive sciences shows us that this is probably because people on the left and right tend to view the world from very different moral frameworks. People on the left tend to prioritize things like biodiversity, human rights, and care for others. And because climate change has become so politicized and tied to the left, arguments about it are often framed this way. Yet these arguments are highly unlikely to work on your climate-denying uncle, because people on the right tend to value things like patriotism, enterprise, and self-reliance. So to get your Uncle Joe listening, you need to frame the argument in ways that make sense to him. For example, you can talk about nature as a resource and how it's falling into serious disrepair, and taking action on it is really a sense of patriotic duty. And also, the renewable resource energy sector is enterprising and creating lots of jobs. And really, when you think about it, renewing or taking away our dependence on fossil fuels is really about self-reliance anyway, right? Now, if all else fails, you can rely on trusted messengers. People who are embedded in different worldviews than you might have, but who believe climate change is a really serious issue and are passionate about spurring support for action. The moral of the story is we need not give up hope for the world's coral reefs. Why? Because we have you, and all of us can make a difference by simply changing the way that we talk about climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you.